After learning some information about infinite space, Luo Feng decided to activate the token. Luo Feng felt his consciousness being drawn into a distant realm, where an unseen force condensed it into a physical body. When he opened his eyes, he found himself in a vast expanse of mountains and forests and immediately sensed that this body looked identical to his one in the land of origin but was only a normal godly king-level body. This matched the information his master, Emperor Chu, had previously given him about the treasure ground infinite space. He confirmed that everyone entering infinite space possessed the same baseline body. Without the perfect divine body, formless transformation abilities, or avatars, he then discovered that the origin grade Dao had been sealed. According to the records, 19 origin grade Daos, including the 9 supreme rule Daos of the land of origin and other inherited Daos such as Thunderbolt and Flame, were completely suppressed. Luo Feng attempted to sense the great Dao of destruction but found no response, proving that not even a trace of law fluctuation could be stirred. He was shocked by Yuan's methods, as the creator of this treasure ground had completely sealed these Daos. Flying upward to survey the terrain, Luo Feng confirmed his approximate location and understood that everyone here could initially rely only on physical strength and spiritual will. The main participants were godly kings, while only a few exceptional primal chaos realm cultivators could enter. Some godly kings even possessed spiritual will at the ultimate god-king level, making them formidable competitors. He recalled that infinite space evaluated participants in 3 areas: the strength of spiritual will, the ability to open new cultivation paths, and solo kills of indigenous creatures. Success in these areas granted reward points that could be exchanged for inheritances, secret treasures, and cultivation resources. However, Luo Feng judged that earning reward points was extremely difficult and that most ancient cultivators viewed it similarly to earning merit points in the ancient countries, though the rewards here had a much higher ceiling. Assessing himself, he realized his spiritual will was only at the second realm of God-King level and considered average among the competitors. Since further improvement of spiritual will was extremely difficult despite his cultivation of the Lai Yuan technique and the Great Destruction heart refining technique, he turned his thoughts toward opening a new path. He had long intended to create the Great Tao of Life and Death by merging the Great Tao of Life origin and the Great Tao of Destruction origin. And because both paths were sealed in infinite space, he believed this environment might help him achieve that goal. As for killing indigenous creatures, he recognized that the regions rich in such creatures were likely already occupied by major forces. Leaving the mountain forest, Luo Feng flew toward territory controlled by the Flame Wind ancient country. But because the space origin Dao was also sealed, his flight was slow. During his journey, he repeatedly came into contact with vast spiritual wills that dominated enormous regions. One such will, likely at the ultimate god-king level, identified him as Luo He and declared itself to be the god of fire from the Two Realms Palace, warning him to leave its territory. Continuing onward, Luo Feng encountered several more territories belonging to the Thunder ancient country, Wanfa Tower, and the Two Realms Palace, all guarded by ancient existences possessing ultimate god-king level spiritual will. He carefully avoided conflict and eventually reached a region recorded in the intelligence as belonging to the Flame Wind ancient country. Upon entering, he was enveloped by a terrifying spiritual will far surpassing the ultimate god-king level. The pressure caused his spiritual will to tremble, and he instinctively thought of the catastrophe beast. The will recognized him as Luo He and noted that, as a primal chaos realm cultivator who had reached infinite space and cultivated the calamity beast diagram, his spiritual will contained traces of the catastrophe beast's essence. The owner of the will then revealed himself to be Emperor Ming, one of the 13 emperors of the Flame Wind ancient country and the creator of the calamity beast diagram. Luo Feng respectfully acknowledged that the diagram had greatly benefited him. Emperor Ming, whose legendary rise had taken him from an exile in a minor cosmos to the rank of emperor, possessed an unimaginably profound and tranquil spiritual will. Recognizing Luo Feng as Emperor Chu's disciple and appreciating the rarity of his achievements despite his humble origins, Emperor Ming offered him a small piece of territory within the lands occupied by the Flame Wind ancient country, where 3 indigenous creatures resided. He told Luo Feng that he could accept it or seek opportunities elsewhere. Understanding that he should remain low profile during the early stages of exploration and gradually familiarize himself with infinite space, Luo Feng gratefully accepted. Emperor Ming then transmitted a map to the designated territory, and Luo Feng immediately departed for it. Watching him leave, Emperor Ming felt a trace of goodwill toward Luo Feng because he understood the value of opportunities to those born in humble circumstances. Even as one of the most powerful beings in the land of origin, Emperor Ming still remained in infinite space with a fragment of his consciousness, cultivating quietly and determined to seize every possible opportunity. A mindset that had ultimately allowed him to rise to the rank of emperor. A man in green robes sat cross-legged on the grass when he suddenly opened his eyes. Sensing a black-clothed figure arriving in the distance, he immediately recognized him as Luo He. Luo Feng also noticed the man and nodded with a smile, addressing him as Godly King Tian Mu. Tian Mu was a godly king from the 13 veins of the imperial clan of the Flame-Wind ancient country, specifically from the Emperor Zhu Feng lineage. Upon recognizing Luo Feng, he stepped forward to greet him with unusual warmth and respect. Although he was a first-realm godly king and carried the pride of the imperial clan, he treated Luo He with humility. Because Luo He was already a transcendent of the primal chaos realm and widely believed to potentially reach overlord-level existence in the land of origin. In terms of current combat strength, Tian Mu admitted they were essentially on similar footing. Luo Feng stated that he was permitted by His Majesty to hunt in this region. Tian Mu explained that within infinite space, the safest territories were those governed by His Majesty, and granting Luo He access to such a region showed strong favor and recognition. Even within the imperial clan, such high-level hunting grounds were carefully controlled. Tian Mu then asked curiously how Luo Feng had obtained the qualification to enter infinite space, since even primal chaos realm experts within the imperial clan only had a single free entry, and additional entries required merit points. He explained the internal system. Imperial clan members could exchange entries at a discounted rate, 1/10 of the cost charged to guest elder godly kings. For imperial clan members, one entry cost 5 million merit points, while for guest elder godly kings it was 50 million per entry. Even for a first-realm godly king, accumulating 5 million merit points was extremely difficult. And for outsiders, 50 million was an even more daunting threshold requiring exceptional strength and resources. Luo Feng responded that his entry opportunity came from the Thunder ancient country, though he did not elaborate further, only saying it required significant effort. Tian Mu was slightly surprised, then admired him openly, stating that apart from the two imperial clans, very few primal chaos realm cultivators could obtain access to ancestor-level treasure lands in infinite space. He inferred that Luo He must have secured this opportunity purely through strength. Tian Mu then compared himself and other cultivators nurtured by clan resources, calling them relatively ordinary in comparison. Luo Feng replied modestly that even godly kings were not ordinary, noting that he himself was still stuck at a bottleneck. Tian Mu laughed and replied that it was not truly a bottleneck for someone like Luo He, and it would not be long before he also became a godly king. Their conversation remained relaxed and equal, without the usual hierarchy between realms. After a period of casual discussion, the two parted ways. Luo Feng reflected on the situation. Within the imperial clan, 5 million merit points could be accumulated with effort, but for guest elder godly kings, 50 million was a massive barrier. Across the land of origin, powerful ancient existences formed alliances, competing and fighting for resources, while the two supreme ancestors rarely interfered, either due to indifference or because these resources were originally left behind by an ancestor. Luo Feng then headed toward his assigned hunting area. According to Emperor Ming's arrangement, there were 3 native creatures in his territory, all of which could be repeatedly hunted for reward points. After flying for over 10 breaths, Luo Feng arrived at the location of one target. He observed a massive creature existing between reality and illusion. It had a vast body with 8 enormous tentacles extending into the void, and a giant head with a single blood-red eye staring directly at him. Even its gaze carried an invisible spiritual invasion meant to affect his will. However, Luo Feng's spiritual will, already at the second realm of godly king, and protected by the Lai Yuan technique, treated this pressure as insignificant. He calmly analyzed the creature. All native beings in infinite space were fundamentally spiritual entities, where spirit was the core and physical form was secondary. Their movement range was also highly restricted. The tentacled creature simultaneously observed Luo Feng. In its perception, Luo Feng represented its ninth tribulation. It had undergone countless cycles of 1,000 tribulations, evolution. And this encounter was another crucial test. If it survived enough tribulations, it could transform. Failure meant death. It therefore remained extremely patient, prepared for a prolonged struggle. Both sides attacked almost immediately. Luo Feng struck first. Even though 19 origin-grade Daos were sealed in infinite space, the basic law of primal chaos could still be used. The tentacled creature retaliated with overwhelming physical force. Each tentacle carried godly king-level power, comparable to Luo Feng's physical strength. However, its techniques were extremely crude compared to Luo Feng's refined combat instincts and Dao control. Luo Feng evaded effortlessly like a shadow, then used a precise strike, his foot like a blade, to pierce the creature's head, instantly blasting a bloody cavity through it. The creature roared and unleashed a surge of chaotic spiritual force, attempting to invade Luo Feng's consciousness. The spiritual assault was immense, but Luo Feng remained unmoved. His will defense rendered it ineffective. The creature, however, was shocked. It had previously managed to slightly contaminate other godly kings, but Luo Feng's will was completely impenetrable. A brutal melee followed. The creature's body was repeatedly shattered under Luo Feng's attacks. Tentacles torn apart, flesh collapsing continuously. After roughly the time of a cup of tea, Luo Feng had completely destroyed its physical form multiple times. Yet the creature did not die. Under the control of its incorporeal will, its body rapidly reformed from dispersed energy and returned to its original state. Luo Feng was not surprised. According to the intelligence, native creatures in infinite space could not be killed through physical destruction alone. Even after hundreds or thousands of annihilations, they would only temporarily vanish and later recover. Forcing them into disappearance would yield reward points, but permanent death required annihilating their will. However, doing so required extremely high spiritual strength, typically the ultimate realm of godly king level. Luo Feng evaluated his own strength. His spiritual will was only at the second realm godly king. Even with the Lai Yuan technique, he was uncertain whether he could fully erase the creature. The creature, meanwhile, persisted. It regarded this as its ninth tribulation and continued resisting calmly, as though accustomed to repeated cycles of life and death trials. Then Luo Feng activated a spiritual will technique. In the creature's perception, everything collapsed into a rotating, overwhelming star-like force that directly crushed its chaotic mental power. Nearly 80% of its spiritual essence was annihilated in a single instant. The creature panicked. It realized Luo Feng's will attack was far beyond anything it had previously encountered. Without hesitation, it voluntarily disintegrated its body and withdrew its consciousness. Escaping the battlefield entirely, it retreated to a distant world. This world was filled with competing kingdoms and countless struggling cultivators. However, its true rulers were demons, immortal, imperishable beings who fed on emotions and desires. The tentacled creature itself was one of the origins of these demon overlords. Essentially a foundational heavenly will of the world, occupying a massive portion of the ocean and acting like a hidden, Tao of heaven, entity. It reflected on Luo Feng's attack. This was its ninth tribulation, and he had destroyed nearly 80% of its chaotic spiritual power in a single strike. Even for it, this was an unprecedented level of threat. However, it realized Luo Feng had mainly destroyed its chaotic and unstable thoughts. What remained was more refined and concentrated spiritual essence. Since it fed on the emotions of countless beings, its consciousness had become increasingly chaotic over time. This trial actually helped purify it. The 1,000 tribulations process was both danger and tempering. Once completed, it would transform, although it needed to recover before the next descent. It intended to return later for further trials. Back in infinite space, Luo Feng observed that the creature had not reappeared. He concluded that while physical destruction could temporarily remove it, he still could not eliminate it completely. He also noticed contamination from the creature's chaotic spiritual residue. Fragments of emotion and desire had infiltrated his own will during the clash. At that moment, infinite space responded. A vast law descended and enveloped him. Trialist. Luo he from land of origin. For repelling a spiritual being once. Reward points equals 1. Combat using basic law of primal chaos, evaluation low. No new Dao created. Reward points equals 0. Spiritual will, second realm godly king level, evaluation medium. Reward points equals 100. Total reward points 101. Formless rules descended briefly and then withdrew. Luo Feng noticed a rule imprint on the palm of his left hand, which allowed him to connect to the infinite space rules, view reward points, and exchange for resources in the treasure vault. He realized that earning reward points was extremely difficult. Defeating spiritual beings only granted full rewards the first time, 1 point, and subsequent rewards continuously decreased, eventually dropping below 0.01 after repeated kills. He concluded that infinite space placed great emphasis on forging new great Daos and on spiritual will, implying it was a legacy left by the ancestor whose selection criteria likely focused on these two aspects, and possibly on achieving realms beyond the ultimate realm of God Cain. Luo Feng believed the ancestor valued creation of new great Daos over comprehension of existing ones, possibly hinting at a level beyond the God Cain. However, since the ultimate realm was still far from him and only a few existed across the land of origin, he chose to proceed step by step and first inspect the treasure vault. Through the rule imprint, he accessed vast information and discovered that his 101 reward points only allowed viewing items priced at or below 101 points. He first examined inheritances and found 9 realms of extinction. First realm, perfection inheritance, costing 100 points, described as universally applicable across origin worlds and corresponding to the first realm of God Cain. It required an extremely high entry threshold, needing spiritual will surpassing God King level, or the cultivator would be assimilated by the destruction origin Dao. Luo Feng was shocked that a God King level inheritance could require such willpower and be nearly impossible to fully master, suggesting terrifying intent behind its creation. He then saw 10,000 transformation divine body, intermediate inheritance. First 2 volumes, also costing 100 points and corresponding to the second realm of God Cain. Later he found another perfection inheritance, temporal walker, first volume, costing 90 points, with extremely strict conditions. Only 3 successful entrants among over 10,000. All above ultimate God Cain. Requirements included surpassing God King will, comprehending all branches of time origin Dao and space origin Dao, and possessing extreme spatial temporal talent, or else facing temporal spatial annihilation or misfortune. Luo Feng inferred that its danger was even higher than 9 realms of extinction. Despite lower cost, he speculated that such perfect inheritances must have been created by unimaginably powerful beings. Comparing infinite space with the inheritances of the 2 ancient countries, he found the latter inferior since they were only left by 2 ancestors, while infinite space contained far superior but much harder to obtain inheritances due to reward point scarcity. He then found 8 tribulations lifeform, first calamity, superior inheritance, costing 5 points, corresponding to first realm of God Cain. It was considered the highest grade in Flamewind ancient country but only superior here. He summarized inheritance tiers. Perfection, theoretically perfect but nearly impossible to master. Special grade, extremely high threshold. Rare full mastery even among God Kings. Superior, broad cultivation range. Intermediate, typical God King cultivation. And anything below was negligible. He selected World Lifeform, Part 1, Special Grade, costing 30 points. It required comprehension of all 6 branches of life origin Dao and 8 branches of matter origin Dao, focusing on treating the body as a world evolving into a source world. It was created by an old friend of Yuan and divided into 3 realms corresponding to God King levels, with higher content requiring direct teaching. Luo Feng recognized its similarity to his own transformation method and decided to exchange for it immediately. After receiving it, he learned it contained profound theories on life forms and source worlds, including triune form, 10-directional world form, and 24-aspected form. He realized that although his transformation method could temporarily substitute for matter origin Dao requirements, it would eventually reach a bottleneck, and he would still need these inheritances as references for his own path. He began cultivating the inheritance while acknowledging he was still in the primal chaos realm and had not mastered any origin Dao branch. So forging his own Dao would take time. He also noted that infinite space participants included God Kings and even emperors. He then felt spiritual contamination from infinite space, caused by damaged spiritual beings and lingering wills of countless creatures. He used the destruction refinement method, using his will as a foundation to grind and erase his own spiritual impurities. Although painful and slow before, the current heavy contamination improved its effectiveness. He understood this purification also refined his spirit and will, increasing clarity and condensation. He realized the opportunity was deliberately arranged to help cultivators purify spirit and forge their own paths. He concluded that removing spiritual pollution significantly enhanced his spiritual state, making the method more effective, and continued studying the newly obtained special grade inheritance. At the border of the flame-wind ancient country, Shangji City, Luo Feng sat in a quiet room of the Garrison mansion, cultivating while holding a jug of Shengbing precious medicine, a cultivation aid made from godly king exotic beast materials. After consuming it, his soul felt clearer and calmer. He reflected on a special grade inheritance called World Life Form, which he had begun to study superficially over tens of thousands of days. This inheritance, left by an old friend of Yuan, was of extremely high level, far surpassing other known techniques such as 8 Tribulations Life Form and Extermination of 72 Blades, and even brief insights within it significantly deepened his understanding of cultivation. The inheritance emphasized that cultivation inside the braided cage benefits from the origin grade Tao as a reference, making progress relatively easier, while outside it, cultivators must grope in darkness and carve their own path, making cultivation far more difficult. It stressed that every aspect of a cultivator can be refined: body, movement, technique, wisdom, insight, soul, and will, but insight is the most elusive and fundamental. Luo Feng agreed, recognizing that insight is often improved only indirectly through rare treasures like primordial crystal spirit fruits. Strengthening spiritual will, soul cultivation, or physical enhancement that indirectly supports mental clarity. But all of these remain secondary methods. The inheritance taught that true progress on the great Tao depends on improving insight. And one effective method is to use lower-level comprehension to create higher-level secret techniques. For example, if one fully understands the 6 branches of the great Tao of life origin, creating the Trinity form would be easy, but attempting to create it using only primal chaos realm-level understanding greatly increases difficulty, forcing repeated trials that naturally refine insight. The creator emphasized not to deliberately chase breakthroughs, but to continuously attempt creating high-level techniques from lower-level understanding, accumulating progress until breakthroughs occur naturally. At the godly king level, where the origin grade Tao still provides guidance, this is the best stage to train insight. Once beyond it, cultivators are left entirely in darkness and progress becomes much harder. This understanding changed Luo Feng's mindset. Previously, he relied on treasures like primordial crystal spirit fruits and focused on breaking through realms by mastering Tao branches. Now he realized that the key was training the ability to operate without guidance, refining insight through creation. Since his cultivation speed was already fast, there was no need to rush. He decided to use primal chaos level Tao comprehension to attempt creating godly king level secret techniques. He had only created one such technique before, the Trinity form, and intended to continue researching. He also planned to study primordial bloodline creatures to better understand their life forms, sending an avatar into the subdued world for this purpose. The world of Shangji was filled with primordial bloodline creatures at the primal chaos level. With bloodlines already extremely diluted, Luo Feng encountered a massive rock-like creature, which, upon seeing him, became hostile and warned him to leave, fearing cultivators who regularly captured such beings for bloodline refinement experiments that often led to their deaths. Luo Feng restrained it with a Black River energy palm and stated he only needed small amounts of materials rather than its life. The creature, unable to resist, agreed and provided a small amount of claw, skin, bone, and blood, all of which it could quickly regenerate. Luo Feng confirmed he would only take such materials and would not destroy them. He continued collecting biological materials from multiple primordial bloodline creatures across the world. Those who cooperated were released, while more stubborn ones were sometimes captured into the Star Tower. Their resistance was used as deterrence to encourage compliance among others. If inspected by envoys from the flame-wind ancient country, Luo Feng would release any imprisoned creatures, as such inspections were extremely rare. occurring only once every 1,000 eras or even less frequently. Over time, Luo Feng remained extremely low profile in Shangji City, despite expectations that a first primal chaos realm transcendent would cause upheaval. He avoided missions, conflicts, and public attention, rarely seen in major cities. 100 eras passed during his tenure as Garrison commander. Meanwhile, in the Thunder Ancient Country's Zuoshan City, another primal chaos realm transcendent, Mountain Sitting Guest, studied primordial bloodline mysteries in isolation. By understanding its structure, he had reached the transcendent level. He noticed that even residual spiritual will within the bloodline was difficult to erase and carried a high-level Dao influence. He received intelligence that the master of the Shi kingdom had ambushed the monarch of Yu country in the Tianhe secret region, placing him in danger of losing his true body. This conflict involved alliances of multiple godly king second realm beings and suggested a larger hidden force behind the Shi kingdom. Mountain Sitting Guest recognized that the monarch of Yu country, also a primordial bloodline cultivator, would suffer greatly if his true body fell, requiring resource-intensive recovery. He observed that the balance between the Shi kingdom and Yu kingdom could shift significantly. He also concluded that the Shi kingdom master likely had powerful allies enabling coordinated attacks by multiple second-realm godly kings. Despite his strength in the first realm of godly king, he knew he was still far from being able to kill his greatest enemy, the Emperor of Tian Kun of the Shi kingdom, a second-realm godly king. He reflected that although Luo Feng had exceptional talent and had already become the first primal chaos realm transcendent, his current whereabouts and progress were unclear. Mountain Sitting Guest believed only Luo Feng might eventually reach a level capable of confronting the Emperor of Tian Kun. So he continued waiting for his disciple to grow stronger before formally acknowledging him. Shangji City had become far more prosperous than it was 100 eras ago. The news that Great Saint Luo He, the undisputed #1 expert among those who had transcended the primal chaos realm, had been stationed there for 10,000 eras spread across the land of origin. As a result, more small factions, branch families, and eternal true god clans chose to settle in the city. Trade between the two ancient countries also flourished because Shangji City possessed both a strategic border location and exceptional security. In the dangerous land of origin, where robbery and slaughter were common, no one dared to cause trouble in a city personally guarded by Great Saint Luo He. At the Garrison mansion, Moyu Qingyan arrived with several trusted aides. Since becoming an eternal true god through the bloodline cultivation system more than 10 eras earlier, he had been entrusted by Luo Feng and the primordial ancestor with many important responsibilities. The primordial ancestor acted as deputy garrison commander, while Moyu Qingyan served as inspection general and handled numerous internal affairs of the city. Because he was Luo Feng's only direct disciple, everyone in the mansion treated him with great respect. Moyu Qingyan soon reached the pavilion where Luo Feng was resting. Luo Feng was very satisfied with this disciple. Although Moyu Qingyan's talent was mediocre and he had struggled greatly even to become a void space true god, Morosa had patiently guided him and later advised him to switch to the easier bloodline cultivation system. With sufficient resources, he eventually became an eternal true god. More importantly, he had never abused his master's reputation or acted arrogantly, earning the trust of both Luo Feng and the primordial ancestor. Standing before his master, Moyu Qingyan could sense that countless laws of heaven and earth were subtly revolving around Luo Feng, demonstrating an unfathomable level of cultivation. He explained that he had spent a long time with Zhang Yongge of the Zhang family and had decided to make her his Dao companion. He intended to formally visit her parents and afterward travel with her to Huyang City to visit his father. Luo Feng approved of his decision. He pointed out that although Zhang Yongge belonged to the royal Zhang family and had distant ties to the Wind Chapter god Cain, her lineage was extremely remote and her status was not particularly high. As Luo Feng's direct disciple, Moyu Qingyan was more than worthy of marrying her. Luo Feng then summoned Morosa. Morosa immediately appeared and admitted that he already knew about the matter and had even advised Moyu Qingyan to focus on cultivation instead of romance. Nevertheless, since his disciple had already made up his mind, he accepted it. Luo Feng instructed Morosa to accompany Moyu Qingyan and represent him during the formal visit to the Zhang family. More than a dozen eras earlier, Morosa had publicly revealed his primal chaos realm cultivation so his appearance on behalf of Luo Feng would be considered a great honor by the Zhang family. Before they departed, Luo Feng left an invisible protective mark on Moyu Qingyan. He explained that if any danger arose during the journey, the mark could be activated instantly to protect him and Zhang Yongge. Since Morosa could not display his full strength openly, Luo Feng prepared this hidden safeguard for his disciple. Watching this, Morosa could not help but sigh inwardly. Although he himself was a genuine God King, he increasingly found it impossible to understand the methods and depth of Luo Feng, who was still technically only at the primal chaos realm. After sending them away, Luo Feng did not interfere further. He believed that love was an important and beautiful part of his disciple's life and preferred to let him walk that path on his own. Meanwhile, inside infinite space, Luo Feng continued tempering his spiritual will. He repeatedly battled a native spiritual being, allowing his own mind to become contaminated by chaotic thoughts and then refining those impurities away. This process continuously strengthened his spiritual will. During another clash, Luo Feng condensed all of his spiritual will into a massive star and crushed the enemy's spiritual power, destroying more than 90% of it. However, a small amount of spiritual power remained and quickly reassembled. A voice then announced that the tentacled creature had passed its ninth calamity. An invisible force descended and fully restored it. The creature was delighted because it had finally succeeded after being destroyed by Luo Feng more than 1,000 times. Before disappearing forever, the creature informed Luo Feng that they would never meet again. Luo Feng understood that many native creatures within infinite space could disappear permanently after being defeated enough times. In the territory originally granted to him by Emperor Ming, there had been 3 spiritual beings. After 100 eras, 2 had already vanished, while the third yielded almost no reward points. The value of remaining there had become negligible. During these 100 eras, Luo Feng's spiritual will had improved enormously through constant tempering and purification. Nevertheless, he still could not completely eradicate a spiritual being in a single strike because their vitality was astonishing. This also made him understand why only experts with Ultimate Realm God King spiritual will and supreme spiritual techniques had any hope of completely killing such beings. Having decided to move on, Luo Feng traveled to the edge of Emperor Ming's territory and respectfully bid farewell. Emperor Ming was surprised by the speed of Luo Feng's progress and remarked that his spiritual will was already approaching the ultimate realm of the God King. Luo Feng thanked Emperor Ming for providing him with a safe place to cultivate during the past century. Luo Feng explained that the native creatures in his territory had nearly all disappeared and that he intended to establish his own territory elsewhere. Emperor Ming said that such disappearances were normal because native creatures defeated more than 1,000 times would often be relocated to distant regions of infinite space. He also explained that members of the imperial clan were only given temporary territories in the early stages of cultivation and eventually had to survive independently. As a farewell gift, Emperor Ming presented Luo Feng with a special calamity beast diagram that he had personally painted. The diagram contained an extremely powerful will and was completely different from the ordinary version sold outside. Emperor Ming explained that although many people had seen the shadow of the catastrophe beast, a painting represented the image of the beast as perceived in the artist's own heart. Therefore, every calamity beast diagram was unique. Luo Feng gratefully accepted the gift. Although Emperor Ming and his master, Emperor Chu, did not have a good relationship, Emperor Ming had treated him generously and provided him with valuable guidance and protection. After Emperor Ming withdrew his consciousness, Luo Feng respectfully bowed one last time and departed, beginning his independent journey in infinite space and preparing to establish a territory of his own.